Hey everyone, Super 3 Ogre, and I'm here, and this is my review for Chosen One, Alexandre Daigle, the new documentary directed by Jay Nelson. Now, as a hockey fan and as an NHL fan, I didn't really know a lot about his career. I grew up as a Leafs fan, and I grew up watching the Leafs during the time where Sundin, Domi, Joseph, Roberts, Tucker, Corson, so on and so forth were playing for the team. I also grew up as a huge Wayne Gretzky fan, and he's still my favorite player to this day. So I know that Daig had comparisons to Lemieux, to Gretzky, and to a lot of other great players, but I didn't really know about the trajectory he was supposed to hit in his career. And this documentary, even though it's a little bit short, it's still informative. I think it's a very good documentary in showcasing how the pressures, the media attention, the kind of high expectations that we have for certain players and end up being like very catastrophic and very bad in some instances for these players. Like some players end up becoming big superstars, end up fulfilling their destiny and, even go beyond the expectations that people put for them. But for some players like Daig himself, he explains in the documentary he lost his drive for the sport. He didn't love the sport anymore at one point. He makes a comeback and he actually had a decent NHL career. Like he still scored 300 points, I believe. And a lot of players don't even hit 100 points, let alone even 50 points. The fact that he still hit a decent amount of goals, a decent amount of assists and points shows that he wasn't really a total bust in comparison to some other players that were picked at a really high position. I think it's a very informative documentary because when we look at sports, we usually put a lot of pressure on the players to fulfill certain expectations. Like if a player doesn't win a championship, we say that they were not a great player in comparison to another player that maybe was not as great as them in terms of their athleticism or their sportsman-like qualities, but we consider those players greater because they had a championship in comparison to another player. And I think that's unfair because all in all, like everyone's playing the same sport and, everyone is trying their best to become the person that they want to be. And I think that Daig even talks about that in the documentary. He says that, he tried his best, but it is kind of hard to sometimes push forward when the body and the mind can only go as forward as it can. And, it's kind of hard because like his draft class included players like Chris Pronger and Paul Kariya and, Victor Kozlov. Like it was a really stacked class. And I think that in comparison to those other players, yeah, he might have been a bust, but I think that he still had a great career. I still think he had a great enough influence into hockey. A lot of people grew up watching hockey in Ottawa and remember him as a player alongside Alexei Yashin and, the other players that played at the time. I think that, this is a great documentary in terms of showing why it's important that we need to lessen the pressure that we give towards certain players because, who knows, maybe if he had less expectations, he might have ended up being a player of Korea, Pronger, and the other players in his draft class's stature. And I think that this, even though it's a short documentary, I think it's a very informative one in terms of talking about the mental pressures, the kind of media attention that these young players have to go through in order to fulfill their destinies and their qualities as a player in the league and in the future. So my score for this documentary is an 8 out of 10. I think if you're a hockey fan, if you're an NHL fan like myself, this will be a good watch. Even if you're not a fan of sports, it's still a good watch in terms of knowing what it takes to be a player and what it takes to survive in the game itself. So yeah, it's playing on Amazon Prime right now. And let me know in the comments below, once you've seen the documentary, your thoughts on the film.